Flames roared through the Texas night as the ranch was engulfed, its fiery tendrils threatening to erase Will's last connection to his past. Cassie, a whispered figure of compassion and courage, leapt into action amidst the inferno. Was this the moment she'd prove her worth, not just to Will, but to herself? But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Cassie Carter stood on the wooden platform of the desolate railway station, the midday Texan sun beating down relentlessly. Her skin felt like it was simmering as the heat radiated up from the sun-bleached planks beneath her feet. Her only belongings, a small, worn suitcase and a heart laden with untested dreams, seemed insignificant against the vastness of her new surroundings. Cassie, a mail-order bride, had made the voyage with hopeful anticipation, answering an ad that promised a prosperous future alongside Arthur Greenfield. Yet, the reality she faced was far from the hopeful vision she had dared to imagine. Arthur Greenfield was a man who spoke with clipped precision and moved with an air of entitlement. His eyes appraised Cassie from head to toe, as if she were merchandise on display in a shop window, rather than a person seeking a new life. He frowned, a subtle but unmistakable gesture, and Cassie felt an uneasy chill despite the oppressive heat. Though she stood merely a foot away from her intended, his presence was distant, enveloped by an aura of aloofness that made their encounter feel transactional. "Thank you for coming, Miss Carter, but I'm afraid you're not quite what I had in mind," Arthur said, his tone betraying not a flicker of emotion. His words were crisp, clear, and cutting, each syllable a slash to her nascent hope. Cassie felt every eye on the platform narrowing in judgment, each townsfolk a silent jury reaching a unanimous verdict of dismissal. She searched Arthur's face for any glimmer of compassion, any indication of the man she'd corresponded with through letters full of promises and romanticized visions, but found none. His dreams were plastered in opulent mansions and dazzling soirees, not in the simplicity of the woman before him. Her predicament quickly became the center of whispered conversations amongst the few onlookers. The women tugged their children along, and the men cast cursory glances that spoke volumes of their scorn. Cassie's cheeks flushed with humiliation, not from the heat, but from the raw exposure of rejection. Cassie managed a polite yet insincere smile as she reassured Arthur that she understood, thanked him for his time, and watched as he turned his back without another word. Alone, she settled onto a bench, her suitcase a steadfast companion, her dreams shrinking in the glare of reality. The sun was sinking lower, stretching the shadows across the platform, when the town began to lose interest in the solitary figure among them. To them, she was a passing anecdote, another tale of unfilled promises and dashed dreams. But for Cassie, it was but the beginning of an unexpected chapter, one that left her future hanging delicately in the balance amidst the sprawling Texas landscape. In the vast, undulating plains just outside the small Texas town of Cedar Ridge, the sun beat down with its uncompromising gaze, casting long shadows that danced amongst the rustling grasses. The dust from the dry earth, a fine, incessant powder, coated the town in shades of sepia, lending a muted air to an already quiet existence. This is where William "Will" Prescott had chosen to retreat, away from prying eyes and the echoes of a past that trailed him like an unwanted specter. The town knew him as a man of few words. His presence felt more in the silhouettes of nightfall than in the bustling of midday. He had become part of the landscape, sturdy and unyielding, yet distant. Today, like many days before, brought Will into town. He moved with a purpose, one carved into his routine out of necessity rather than desire. His visits were as unobtrusive as the man himself. Supplies needed for the ranch dictated his every journey into public view, and it was with singular focus that he maneuvered through the streets, never lingering longer than required. The townsfolk, aware of his reticence, respected the invisible boundary he had crafted around himself, each nod and greeting perfunctory at best. Yet, as fate would have it, today's trip bore an unexpected twist. As Will loaded sacks of feed into the back of his worn truck, a figure caught his eye. A woman seated on the platform, her shoulders hunched against the sun's unforgiving brilliance. A suitcase by her side like a forlorn companion. There was something about her posture, a silent plea wrapped in defeat, which stirred the long dormant empathy within him. Cassie Carter appeared like an apparition, and in her, Will instinctively sensed a kindred spirit, a fellow traveler lost amidst the currents of life. His heart, though battered and shielded by years of solitude, could not ignore the tug of an unspoken kinship. He recognized in her eyes a reflection of his own torment. They mirrored the burden of solitude, the prickle of judgment from those who walked with lighter souls. Motivated by a compulsion he couldn't quite name, Will approached her tentatively. The midday heat had swelled to a smothering weight, and its oppressive grasp was evident in the sheen of sweat upon her brow. "Ma'am, I reckon it's too hot to be sitting out here," he began, his voice a gravelly bass softened by genuine concern. Cassie looked up, meeting his gaze with a weary resignation, perhaps expecting more of the pity she had silently endured. Will shifted his weight, the crunch of gravel under his boots offering a fleeting break in the taut silence. "I got a place not far, plenty of shade and a roof over your head." He paused, gauging her reaction. Unspoken understanding passed between them, interspersed only by the call of a distant hawk sailing the azure sky. An offer extended without pretense, stripped of expectation or demand, for he knew all too well the solace and sanctuary the open land could provide. For Cassie, this was a lifeline tossed amidst turbulent waters, a chance to find footing, however temporary. As she hesitated, Will added, a hint of warmth threading through his words. "Ain't much, but you're welcome to it until you find your feet again." With a small, almost imperceptible nod, Cassie accepted his offer, knowing that in this stranger's understanding lay the chance to escape her immediate predicament, and perhaps the possibility of something more, a new beginning, tucked away in the quietude of Will's isolated ranch. Cassie Carter found herself immersed in a world far removed from the expectations she carried with her off the train that fateful day. The expansive breadth of the Texas sky mirrored her newfound freedom, each morning bringing a fresh perspective on life at Will Prescott's ranch. With days beginning at the break of dawn, Cassie's initially unsure hands grew skilled, finding rhythm in the simplicity and satisfaction of hard work. Despite her slight frame, she approached each task with a resolute determination, a quiet but palpable resolve to carve out a place for herself in this new chapter of her life. Will, perhaps unknowingly, had handed Cassie the second chance she desperately needed. The ranch became her sanctuary, a place removed from the judgmental stares and whispered disdain of the townsfolk, who saw her as little more than an outsider and a discarded bride. Here, she discovered a surprising joy in caring for the animals, drawing parallels to the nurturing of her own spirit. The ranch, like Cassie, was in need of gentle hands and persistent care, forging a silent yet powerful bond between her and the land. As Cassie settled into her routine, she began to peel back the layers of Will's guarded demeanor. Their shared meals evolved from quiet, solitary affairs to moments of unexpected camaraderie, where stories sparked like embers in a fire, slowly warming the room and their hearts. Cassie spoke of her aspirations, hopes of a home filled with kindness and acceptance. Her voice held a note of longing, a reflection of the yearning that had propelled her into corresponding with strangers seeking wives, far away in unfamiliar territories. One evening, beneath a sky full of stars, Will found himself sharing more than he had intended. His words spilled forth like an uncontainable flood, revealing the shadows that haunted him, the tragedy that had stolen his family and left behind the shell of a man who withdrew from the expectations of society. The ranch, with its sprawling solitude, had become his refuge, mirroring his heart's desolation. As Will's story unfolded, Cassie listened with a profound empathy, seeing in him a mirror of her own journey, a path paved with loss and solitude. Their conversations blossomed into confidences, each revealing thread weaving them closer together. Yet beneath their camaraderie lay a simmering unease. The town's incessant gossip and Will's lingering self-doubt loomed like storm clouds. Whispered accusations and Will's skepticism occasionally clouded their interactions, sowing seeds of doubt. Yet they persevered, driven by a growing admiration and an unspoken understanding that there was something rare and fragile between them. Tested by suspicion and marred by Will's internal conflicts, the foundation of trust they had painstakingly nurtured held firm. What began as loneliness in two disparate souls had evolved into a persevering alliance. Together, they navigated the delicate balance between vulnerability and strength, drawing courage from one another. Cassie's presence reignited a spark within Will, while his unwavering support instilled in her a sense of belonging she had yearned for all her life. Through shared struggles and dreams, they built a connection strong enough to weather the storms, a partnership born of mutual respect and hope for what could be. The sky was ablaze with the hues of dusk, streaked with orange and red as if foreshadowing the impending turmoil. The quiet evening at Prescott Ranch was disrupted by the pungent smell of smoke that slithered through the evening air like an uninvited guest. Will, usually attuned to the rhythms of his land, didn't notice it at first, wrapped up as he was in the routine chores that defined his isolated existence. It wasn't until Cassie came running, eyes wide and breathless, that reality struck him hard. "Will, fire! It's coming from the barn!" Her voice, though tinged with panic, broke through the usual stoic silence, echoing the urgency of the moment. In the dim light of the setting sun, the fire flickered ominously, casting an eerie glow over the ranch, his sanctuary, his life's work. It was as if a fiery serpent had coiled itself around the barn, intent on devouring everything it touched. Will could only stand in disbelief for a moment, the embers of past trauma flickering within him, before Cassie's shout snapped him into action. In those crucial seconds, it was Cassie who took charge, her simple instincts honed by survival and resilience. She organized the frantic efforts, directing Will to gather water while she rallied the ranch hands. Her voice, usually soft, rang out with a commanding strength that surprised even herself. "Form a line," she ordered, grabbing buckets and passing them to the workers. There was no time for second-guessing as the fire crackled, licking the evening sky. Each person moved as if part of a singular entity, united by urgency and Cassie's unexpected leadership. Determined not to let her new life go up in smoke, Cassie plunged headlong into the thick of the fray. Her hands blistered and red, she braved the searing heat, refusing to let the inferno claim victory. It wasn't just the barn she was fighting for. It was everything she had dreamed of, the sense of belonging she had almost touched, now threatened to slip through smoky tendrils. Meanwhile, Will, fueled by the sight of Cassie's courage, battled his own demons. The fire mirrored the chaos of his past, reigniting the painful memories he had tried to bury. But watching Cassie, he felt something stir, a determination not to lose what he had inadvertently found in her. She was a force he hadn't anticipated, bringing light to his shadows, and he couldn't let her down. As buckets were passed hand to hand in a frantic rhythm, the townspeople, initially drawn as spectators, found themselves inspired by the scene unfolding before them. They saw the fragile yet undeniable strength binding these two unlikely souls, their courage, their commitment turning the tide. In time, the blaze succumbed to their relentless efforts, sputtering out in a final smoky breath. What had threatened to be a night of devastation transformed into a testament of resilience, a story of salvation woven by a community where distrust once lingered. As the dawn sun crept over the horizon, casting a hopeful glow across the smoldering remains, Will and Cassie stood together, hands entwined amidst the ash and embers. It was not just the barn they had saved, but the promise of something more profound and enduring, a shared future and a family forged in the fire. For the first time, the town, once filled with contempt, looked upon them not as outsiders but as their own. As the ranch whispered of echoes past, a new song of belonging and love began to take root in their hearts.